5 powerful banned Yu-Gi-Oh monsters that can actually come off the forbidden list. There were actually some crazy strong Yu-Gi-Oh monsters for their time that can completely come off the ban list and fairly easily. A couple of reasons could be due to time simply changing, the Yu-Gi-Oh format evolving, or particular instances or combos not necessarily being a thing anymore. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 different powerful Yu-Gi-Oh monsters that were some of the most ridiculous monsters in the past, but now are no longer a problem. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. So as you guys should already know, Yu-Gi-Oh is a fairly complex card game with a bunch of nuances and incredible effects. The game has evolved from 2002 when we first received Legend of Blue Eyes in America all the way up until now. But that doesn't mean that there aren't certain Yu-Gi-Oh cards that are really old and still way too powerful. But for this particular list, we actually have a criteria. This is a list of currently banned Yu-Gi-Oh monsters that can completely come off the Yu-Gi-Oh ban list without putting any cards back on. I think it's a pretty invalid argument to say that certain cards can come off the list if other cards get banned, because essentially you're just trading one spot for another instead of just bringing a card off the list. It still shows that the card can be pretty potent and busted. The second rule is that cards can't come off the list simply because they're off the list in the OCG or in Master Duel. If I'm being frank, that's just a pretty weak argument when it comes to bringing a card off the list. And even so, we can still find some pretty strong Yu-Gi-Oh cards that don't deserve to be on the list. I also want to point out that some of the monsters that I'm talking about in this video, I've talked about in the previous video before. But seeing that they're still on the ban list, I still think that they're perfectly viable. In fact, let's roll them all up into one slot and quickly talk about why these cards shouldn't be on the ban list. We talked about how Block Dragon was a really powerful card for back in its time, being a dragon ruler monster that can search rock monsters from the deck to the hand. And while rock monsters have received a decent amount of support since the last time we made this video, it wouldn't be enough to make Block Dragon a busted Yu-Gi-Oh card. Zodiac Drident was a very powerful Yu-Gi-Oh card that was banned because it allowed you to be able to destroy face-up cards on your opponent's side of the field during their turn. It's almost like there's an Exceed monster that is in current modern Yu-Gi-Oh that does the same thing. Well, actually a lot better. Ah yes, Ryzeal Detonator, the monster that can destroy multiple cards on your opponent's side of the field just by them blinking. Not only would Zodiac Drident be considered a watered-down version of Ryzeal Detonator, it's nowhere near as strong as Detonator and requires way more resources to be able to summon just to be able to destroy face-up cards on the field. Lastly is Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King, a card that we talked about should come off the ban list and actually did come off the ban list. Now I'm advocating it for it to go to 3. Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King does make itself unaffected by a particular attribute, monster spells and traps, depending on what you tribute. It also is like Zodiac Drident because it can banish continuous spell cards from the graveyard to destroy cards on the field. It's also incredibly generic, seeing that you can tribute your face-up continuous spell and trap cards that aren't True Draco, meaning you can get rid of cards like Skill Drain and Anti-Spell Fragrance, and is a pretty strong monster in its own right. Why does this card deserve to be at 3? Well, simply because it sucks. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh, there aren't too many Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that will give up their normal summon to be able to summon a Masterpiece. Also, sacrificing 2 monster spells or traps or any combination of them is a huge investment for a monster that doesn't really fit into modern Yu-Gi-Oh. For players that played around the time where Masterpiece was a crazy strong Yu-Gi-Oh card and can't necessarily fathom why the card isn't strong, it actually reminds me of Blackluster Soldier. Blackluster Soldier completely ruined Yu-Gi-Oh formats and is considered as one of the most powerful Yu-Gi-Oh cards to old school retro Yu-Gi-Oh players. It's at 3 in modern Yu-Gi-Oh and no one touches the card. Blackluster Soldier is in fact one of the most powerful Yu-Gi-Oh monster of all time that is now completely useless. I probably should make a video about that. Let me know if that's something you want to see. But Yu-Gi-Oh moves forward, Yu-Gi-Oh strategies get stronger, which means cards that were previously banned get weaker. So we get to talk about some more cards that can come off the list that some players may not like because of the trauma that was instilled when the card was off the list. One of them is easily Heavy Metal Foe's Electrumite. Now, this is one of the most controversial banned Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time. It reflects an era where Konami wants to forget about. the Pendulum era. You see, Konami thought it was a brilliant idea to use the pendulum mechanic to bridge all of the other mechanics in Yu-Gi-Oh! Exceed, Synchros, Fusion, Tribute Summon, and even Ritual could all be solved if you can just special summon as many monsters from your hand and your extra deck to your side of the field. Terrible idea. This was changed in Master Rule 4 when Link monsters were introduced, heavily nerfing pendulum monsters to almost obscurity. Then Heavy Metal Foes Electrumite came out. You see, the release of Heavy Metal Foes Electrumite, it's one of the biggest reasons why Yu-Gi-Oh! Is viewed in a negative light by some, where it's just a mosh pit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards summoning themselves to the side of the field. This Link 2 monster not only allowed you to be able to bridge pendulum strategies together, it also eliminated archetypes in pendulum strategies, which is why we call pendulum decks instead of the archetypes that they're named after, like Sofa Chord, or what are another Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetype that's pendulum? Metal Foes. Yeah, that one was an archetype. Since the banning of Heavy Metal Foes Electrumite, pendulums have fallen into complete obscurity. Even the new retrain Beyond the Pendulum has not helped the deck, and to be honest with you guys, how modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, Electrumite wouldn't help the deck too much either. You see, Electrumite would be a huge boost for pendulum decks, whether they are playing as a mishmash of archetypes or a pure archetype, but it wouldn't be strong enough to be able to compete with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. And it's simply because most modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks only need one card to be able to fully combo, where the balance of pendulum monsters is that you need 2 to 3 to 4 cards to be able to play your combo. On top of that, with most generic Synchros, Links, and Exceed monsters being banned, cards like Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess, Baron de Fleur, and Borreload Savage Dragon no longer being accessible, while Pendulum does have access to Fusions, Synchros, Links, and Exceeds, it doesn't have those generic boss monsters to pull from, making Electrumite infinitely worse. Electrumite might be one of the more controversial cards to talk about, so I want you guys to let me know down below in the comment section, should Electrumite finally come off the ban list, and why or why not? But a card that really shouldn't have much controversy when it comes to the ban list is Spiral Master Plan. Spiral Master Plan is a pretty powerful Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that allows you to be able to add a Spiral Mission card from your deck to your hand. Keep in mind, this is not once per turn, but a little bit more on that later. If it's sent from the field to the graveyard, it allows you to be able to add a Spiral Resort and a Spiral monster from your deck to your hand. That effect is a hard once per turn, meaning that once you gain its effect that one time, you can't use its effect ever again. Spiral players are kind of like Pendulum players. They play a really big combo-based Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck that with 2 to 3 cards allows them to be able to pull off a really big combo, summoning some of the most powerful generic monsters on the board. Spiral Master Plan's ability to be able to consistently add Spiral Mission cards from your deck to your hand allows you to be able to get cards like Spiral Mission Assault, which can special summon Spiral monsters from your hand to your side of the field, and Spiral Rescue, which can summon Spiral monsters from your graveyard. This in turn can give you an infinite loop of monsters to your side of the field to be able to create whatever board that you wish. But there's a couple of problems with Spiral Master Plan. That resource may be valuable for Spiral players, but isn't really valued in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there's a lot less powerful generic monsters that Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies can wind up making if they can almost loop themselves infinitely. It creates a situation where Spiral's best boards are nowhere near as powerful. And also because they require more cards to be able to play in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! With the disruptive cards like hand traps that we have today is far more stronger than the ones that we had when Spiral ran rampant. Understandably so, Spiral Master Plan can be sent to the graveyard with Magician Souls, which kickstarts the combo a little bit faster. But if we're being completely honest here, Spiral would pretty much be a gimmick deck in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Where if it does have those opportunities to be able to combo, it probably still will get cooked by a modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. But most of the time it will wind up being disrupted, and modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks can easily deal with the outcome that Spiral can make. Another really powerful banned Yu-Gi-Oh! Card for its time that would almost fade into obscurity would easily be Fairy Tail Snow. Now, Fairy Tail Snow could still be considered fairly powerful in Master Duel and is off the list inside of the OCG. I want to point out that that is not the argument to why Fairy Tail Snow should be off the ban list, as that would go against our rules, but it does show that Fairy Tail Snow's power can differ depending on the particular climate. Fairy Tail Snow was not banned because of the effects printed on the card. I mean, it is pretty powerful, allowing you to be able to banish 7 cards from your graveyard, field, or hand to summon itself, and then allowing you to be able to flip a face-up monster face down. This can become incredibly important for being able to disrupt your opponent's plays, but does have a really high cost. The reason why Fairy Tail Snow was eventually eventually banned in the TCG and was originally banned overall is because this card can activate itself multiple times in a given turn. If Fairy Tale Snow is sent to the graveyard and you have enough resources, being able to summon this card over and over again can lead to some pretty pesky loops. It also, still to this day, could be considered one of the better cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! But where exactly would Fairy Tale Snow be considered a card that can come off the ban list? Well, you see, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has fixed a previous problem that was pretty detrimental to the card game overall, being able to freely send cards from your deck to the graveyard with ease. Previous powerful send to the graveyard decks like Lightsworn, Tearlament, and Burning Abyss have all had the most important card taking away from them that has been considered catastrophic, which has been Beatrice the Eternal Lady and Curious the Lightsworn Dominion. Without being able to freely send Fairy Tale Snow from your deck to the graveyard, actual deck building has to take place. Fairy Tale Snow's design was to give you a monster with an incredibly high upside, but a card that you necessarily don't want to see inside of your hand. It also is a card that you don't want to see in the early game and can only benefit Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies that send cards from the deck to the graveyard in mass. In current Yu-Gi-Oh! There isn't a single powerhouse Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategy that would be able to exist and take full advantage of Fairy Tale Snow to where it would be a problematic Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. And speaking of that situation, that brings us to our very last Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. This card, like Fairy Tale Snow, is still pretty powerful and decently generic. The only difference here is a change in format and how we addressed modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But before we talk about that, we need to talk about something that's also really important. Big dogs, if you want to support the channel while also getting something in return, consider buying this sexy mat. Oh yeah. This is the Millennium Cloth Yu-Gi-Oh! Mat that you can only catch on TheCaliEffect.com. Big dogs, this was so much in demand when it originally released, it sold out the moment that we dropped it, and you guys have been begging for us to bring it back. Well, due to your request, we have. Go ahead and go to TheCaliEffect.com and pick up your mats today. But also, don't sleep on those Raven Wing sleeves, the #1 sleeve in the entire universe. You can use the mat and sleeves to eventually protect your Spright Elf that could come off the ban list with no problems. Spright Elf was originally banned not because of Spright, but because of Tearlament. Tearlament having Tearlament Merly allowed them to be able to pivot into Spright Elf to special summon Merly to their side of the field to send to the graveyard with Tearlament Sullyk. It also allowed them to be able to fuse on the opponent's turn when they did that, and protected the monsters that were pointing the Spright Elf. And while Spright Elf is still a fairly powerful card and is generic, it really doesn't support the current modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, which most would have to go out of their way to be able to play a level 2, rank 2, or link 2 monster just to make this card. Now, I'm not saying that Spright Elf wouldn't be, in fact, a powerful Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. In fact, I'm actually saying the opposite. I think it would be strong. But oftentimes, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list has made mistakes by banning cards for far too long. And sometimes they forget why the card existed, which was supposed to be for Spright decks and level 2 support. Spright Elf being unbanned would not only help those particular areas, it would allow those strategies to be able to compete again. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about these cards down below in the comment section. Also, if you guys have any other cards you think should be off the ban list, I'd love to see your reasons why. Be sure to go ahead and go to TheCaliEffect.com for all of your merchandise needs, whether it's sleeves, mats, and anything in between coming soon. And of course, if you really enjoyed this lesson, whether you're a Slifer Slacker, a Reading Raw, or an outstanding obelisk, be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.